CBS 46 News presents Public Affairs on Peach.
Good morning and welcome to Public Affairs on Peach. I'm Rebecca Schramm. Our focus this morning is teen dating violence. If there's a teenager in your family, you need to know this is happening more often than you might think. So let's start with some numbers. 1 in 3 teenagers in the U.S. is a victim of dating violence. That can be physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal. Nearly 1.5 million high school students will experience physical abuse from a dating partner this year. And get this, only 33% of teenagers who were in a violent relationship will ever tell anyone about the abuse. For the next half hour, we are going to talk about dating violence and how to fight back. That begins with our first guest, Nancy Freoff, who is president and CEO of the Partnership of Domestic Violence, and also Claire Lisco, a teen advocate from the same organization. Good morning, ladies. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
As we mentioned, there are different forms, of course, of dating violence, but it seems like the one thing that they have in common is that there's a control, a sense of control over somebody else, right, Nancy?
Right, absolutely. From the perpetrator of the violence, it's I want you to belong to me and I want to have you all to myself. So different tactics are used to kind of take away support systems and take away that person's sense of their self and their self-esteem, so that you see the abuser as kind of your only hope and your only contact in the world.
Wow. And you know, we talked about some of the symptoms, you and I, earlier, and a lot of them are fairly well known, but some of them you don't think about, more subtle forms of abuse like name calling, ignoring that other person's feelings, even threatening a pet.
Threatening a pet, making fun of the person in front of other people, ridiculing them, as you said, name calling, telling them that they're no good, that they're worthless, that nobody else will ever want them. So again, really isolating them from their own sense of self as well as from other people.
Putting them down constantly,
Absolutely.
Right? Claire, what are some common behaviors that you see among kids who are maybe going through this type of domestic violence at such an early age?
Yeah, so it can be tricky because in and of themselves, a lot of the warning signs or red flags that indicate that someone is experiencing abuse might look like something of a typical teenager just, having a bad day. So sudden changes in mood, or I think the key here is that they are changes in attitudes and changes in behaviors, changes from their normal way of functioning. And I tell teenagers when I work with them that the key to pay attention to is if you suspect that your friend is in an unhealthy relationship or experiencing abuse, it's time to check in when there's any change from the normal state of how your friend usually is. So if there's unexplained injuries or they're avoiding you, we know a common tactic of abuse is actually isolation or exclusion. So maybe they're not actually avoiding you, maybe they're not allowed to hang out with you. So it's definitely time to check in when there's any sort of change.
So it could be that the partner is telling them, don't hang out with that friend. Well, let me ask you, Nancy, do you feel like sometimes parents are in a state of denial about this? Maybe they just say, no, my teenager is not involved in some sort of domestic violence, teen violence.
Absolutely. 83% of parents report that they don't believe teen dating violence is an issue for their child or their child's friends. And the reality is, as we said, that 1 in 3 teens will be the victim of some type of abuse. So it's very likely that within your friend's circle, this is going on. Within your child's circle, this is going on. So it's so important to open that communication and talk to them and ask them and say, hey, what's going on? Tell me about this. I heard a great show about it today. What do you think about that?
And maybe talk to each other as parents. Sometimes just talking to a fellow parent can help, right?
Oh, absolutely, because I think as we start talking to each other, then that denial goes away. We become aware of it. Our kids hear us talking about it, and they go, oh, gosh, maybe it is safe to go to mom and tell her what I'm afraid about.
Yeah. So, Claire, let me ask you as a teen advocate, how do you suggest a friend, you touched on this a little bit, but if you've got a friend who you think might be a victim of teen violence or teen abuse, how do you approach that friend?
Well, first, knowing that there's a good chance that you're the first person that friend has told about the abuse going on. Unfortunately, we heard the statistic earlier that as many as 33% of teens do not tell anyone about the abuse. So you could be the first person hearing that from them. Encourage them to talk to a trusted adult, whether that's a coach, a teacher, a counselor in the school environment, for example. Create a code word with a friend. Encourage them to have a special word that when they say something like ice cream, like actually I don't really want to get ice cream after all, they know that they need to call them, or in more extreme situations that they need to call 911. Yeah.
And really, that's good advice. And really quickly, how has the internet changed this type of behavior?
It's changed it a lot. So, when we're doing outreach, we ask how many text messages are you sending, how many direct messages, and the numbers that you hear it's communication constantly, all day, every day. So how do we know what excessive is? So it's definitely changed a lot. A lot of the types of emotional abuse can occur online in dating relationships. So the final thing I say quickly is that it's imperative to include in the conversation with parents and their teens. So in addition to talking about what's healthy, unhealthy in a relationship, how do we stay safe on our phone? And encouraging that conversation.
And let me see your phone. I'm paid for it. Let me see. Let me see your phone.
Absolutely.
So that's important. Okay, so we want to make sure that everybody has a crisis hotline number, because this is the way that teenagers can get help, and they can make it so easy. The number is on your screen there. It's 404-873-1766, and that's a hotline that teenagers can call if they feel like they're being
24 hours a day,
victimized.
7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Anything else we want to talk about real quick?
I just really encourage parents, talk to your kids, ask them about what's going on, open up that dialogue. It truly can make a difference.
Even if you feel like they don't want to talk, it's important.
Usually they do.
Thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you.
Great advice. Thank you. When Public Affairs on Peach returns, one man's personal story about teen domestic violence and the daughter he lost to it. We'll be back.